Welcome to another episode of Discograffiti's wildly in-depth Beach Boys series, And Your Dreams Come True, where Brian Wilson freaks like you and me get our chance to delve deep into the barely believable history and prodigious discography of my favorite band of all time, and also coincidentally the best, along with a slew of over 45 top-shelf guests, ranging from musicians inspired by their work, family members, documentary directors, songwriting collaborators, Beach Boys authors, producers, touring band members, and for good measure, some of the Beach Boys themselves. I'm your host, Dave Gebroe. Special thanks goes out to Jeff McAvoy and especially co-producer Dennis Dyken, without whom this series would not have happened. And in this episode, we'll be turning our spray cans on Endless Summer Quarterly magazine. Today's guest is a highly revered Beach Boys historian and the editor of Endless Summer Quarterly, ESQ, the Beach Boys publication of record. In fact, he's been providing historical coverage on the continual goings-on of the Beach Boys for over 30 years now. In addition, he's provided liner notes for the Sony Legacy reissue of Dennis Wilson's Pacific Ocean Blue in 2008, California Music presents Add Some Music in 2021, and many more. He's also written Beach Boys-related cover and feature stories for Goldmine magazine. In 2015 and 16, he wrote and designed Beach Boys official tour programs, and his Beach Boys-endorsed 40-episode podcast, Good Vibrations, a Beach Boys music program, is available on iTunes, Amazon Books, and Spotify. In 2020 and 2021, he co-produced a re-recording of Add Some Music to Your Day with Rob Bonfilio, which included Mike Love, Al Jardine, Bruce Johnston, David Marks, and loads of family and friends, which was included in his 10-song collection, California Music Presents Add Some Music. In 2022 to 23, he provided Whitehorse Pictures with essential research and images for the Beach Boys Disney Plus documentary, and he conducted extensive interviews with director Frank Marshall, Mike Love, and Al Jardine. He's also currently hard at work on a full one-year cycle of ESQ that focuses on Brian Wilson's productions from 1962 to 1972. Lads and ladies out there tinkering in your subterranean man caves on whatever the fire within you mandates that you do, no matter the consequences, rest assured that today's guest is doing just that, and it is safe to say that this man also happens to like the Beach Boys more than your average civilian, considers himself very much a fan, and counts conversing about them amongst his greatest pleasures. So would you please make yourself presentable, as he's done it for you, and it's only right that you step up with your top-level game when a man of his stature's on the premises. It's David Beard!
Oh, wow. Well, I hope everyone's ready.
It is very nice to finally see you, because this is actually the first time I'm seeing you, and we've been talking for some time now about this and sundry other items, but it is great to see you. You have a nice guy's face.
Oh, thanks. Thank you. It's great to be here, and I've been looking forward to this.
Me too. I have very many learned, erudite Beach Boys scholars lined up to be on this show, and possibly almost no more so than you. I mean, you are at the head of the pack. Tell me the story of how ESQ got off the ground, and if you expected it to go in this direction, or if there were a ton of left turns along the way.
Okay. Well, sometime in 1989, I, by that time, was going to record conventions. So at some point, when I moved from New York down to Charlotte, North Carolina, my dad worked for IBM. I ended up seeing the Jan and Dean TV movie Dead Man's Curve. I think it was in early 79. I believe that's correct. We moved down here in January of 79. And it was that TV movie that kind of galvanized my interest in the whole genre, where it was the song Surfin'. It was the moment in the film that did it, because the two actors as Jan and Dean were standing with surfboards at the water, and Jan says to Dean, "This would sound so great on tape." And then they cut right to them singing the song Surfin' in the studio. We didn't have Google or anything in those days, and all I knew is I just loved that moment. And I didn't know that was a Beach Boys song. And so that led me down the rabbit hole. And back in those days also, you didn't have Google, but you did have record stores everywhere. And so I went to a local record store in Charlotte, bought the Jan and Dean Anthology album, and that came with a great booklet in the middle that was written by Dave Marsh of Cream magazine. And that is where I learned about Brian Wilson and the Beach Boys to a degree, and then saw Brian's co-writing credits on a number of their songs, most notably among them Surf City. So that led me to getting Jan and Dean records first, at least to my memory. I had, I think, Best of the Beach Boys through an RCA or Columbia Record Club membership. And going back to junior high, my youth minister, who is actually in the Add Some Music to Your Day video that I put together, that's my youth minister, where it says the preacher adds it to your psalm. That's my youth minister, Paul Martin. God bless him. He got me into the Beach Boys even deeper, because he heard me talking about Jan and Dean and this and that, and he got me deeper into them. So that really is what led me into wanting to go to record conventions. And, once I discovered what those were, because I discovered that if you go to those, you can really have an opportunity to collect, whatever your niche or interest is, because you're going to meet dealers who have specific to that, as opposed to even if you went in used record stores, which there were many back in the late 70s, early 80s. In the Charlotte area, you still didn't necessarily get everything you wanted. And if you went to a record convention, you would find some pretty great stuff. And I was soon finding Smile bootlegs. And by that time, then we're fast forwarding, by that time, the Beach Boys, an American Band documentary had come out. And all that great Malcolm Leo structured footage of them using the Good Vibrations promotional film to go with the Fire music. And it led me, I just was like, what is this Smile stuff? And I was fascinated by it immediately. And the Smile thing became my whole focus. By 1989, I am just so immersed in the Smile story. And I don't know if it's back here somewhere, but the Dominic Priori Dumb Angel Gazette, Look, Listen, Vibrate, and Smile became my Bible.
That was my Bible too.
And the second I got that book, it was my reference guide. Just so, okay, this is when this happened, because it's mostly news clippings and stuff, but they were dated. It was like, if it was a newspaper clipping, it had the date, and you could follow. And Dominic did a great job of putting it together as a timeline. So that, man, I just was to this day, Smile remains my favorite. Cabin Essence is my favorite Beach Boys song.
That's an amazing favorite Beach Boys song. There was something about finding that book at that time that was mandatory for me. And, Dominic's on this show. He did an episode on Muscle Beach Party, did an episode on Surfer Girl. He's obviously going to be coming in for Smile. Finding his book was so important to me because, like you said, no internet at the time. I knew nobody who knew about Smile, let alone had heard it. And there was only, at that point, hissy recordings that I would use a boombox to try to put stuff together that sounded even remotely listenable. And it was, it was an earache to listen to the stuff I was putting together. I wasn't a mixer by trade, but I was in over my head. And what Dominic did that really hit me, not just the way that he had things dated and structured, but the passion behind it. I found somebody somewhere out there who was as crazy for this stuff as I was.
Yeah. I mean, it was years where I was just sucked in, and I couldn't get enough of it. I would go to these record conventions, and I found a great Smile bootleg early on. It was a 2-record set, colored vinyl. Some of those bootlegs weren't very good in terms of what they actually listed was on the records, but most of them weren't. But what I was discovering, there was things I was reading about, and then there was more, right? I mean, what Dominic did, his book did a great job of is kind of explaining to a degree why it didn't happen. I was able to pick up on anything that had a vibe of Smile. So if I were listening to Smiley Smile and I heard Wonderful or Wind Chimes, I could hear the Smile element in it. If I listened to Our Prayer or Cabanescence, or even on the Friends album, Diamond Head, I could hear the Smile element of it. And that's because I immediately, once I fell in love with the Smile sessions and got what Smile was kind of supposed to be, I was very in tune with Brian's sense of direction with that project. So I was hearing stuff that I was just picking up on, and then I would later come to find out most of the stuff that I was hearing was in fact tied to the Smile project. Like I heard, if I heard Can't Wait Too Long, I thought, okay, that's in that same time period, but that's not really... There may be a little bit of a tidbit of something that was initially from Smile, but this is not Smile. This is kind of post, and I was always able to hear that. Vegetables, I could hear elements of things that were clearly Smile, but you can also hear in Vegetables where he started to suddenly go in a different direction.
Because there wasn't information back then, or at least in my world there wasn't, because of the tapes that I would procure along the way for a long time, and it's still difficult for me to think that Can't Wait Too Long is not Smile era, because it was always grouped on the Smile stuff. It has the same hypnotic quality that the Smile stuff has.
It does. And to me, Can't Wait Too Long is almost like You're Welcome. It is Smile era, but I don't think it's, in quotes, Smile appropriate in terms of being on that record any more than Good Vibrations is. Like my version of the Smile Good Vibrations is the early alternate out version that has the different lyrics. Because if you go back to Help Me Rhonda first appears with the fader going in and out on the Today album. Then Brian messes with it a little bit, creates a single out of it, then it ends up on Summer Days.
The Today version scares the shit out of me. It's honestly the only production choice that he's ever utilized that I don't like.
Agreed.
There's something that scares me about it. There's always been something that, and I can't put my finger on it because there's nothing inherently scary about that. But the in and the out, the up and the down of it, he obviously knew that it was a bunt instead of a grand slam because he revisited it. But like in my head, Cool, Cool Water always ends my Smile.
So Surf's Up is my closing track. There's different versions of Smile that I've done. I mean, I've got a 40-minute version. I've got all the bells and whistles thrown in version, which is longer, which would be like a 3 or 4 record set, where it has the humor. George fell out of his French horn and all that, craziness. That's what to this day was so fascinating about Smile is it really is the greatest non-finished record of all time because Brian did so much work on it and created so many moving pieces. And no wonder he couldn't figure out how to finish it because he made so many brilliant moving pieces. If Smile had been finished in its time, to me, it would have meant Brian sitting down with everything. And over here, he's got Mike Love. And over here, he's got Van Dyke Parks. And that's how it would have been creatively finished. Because he would have needed Van Dyke from what they had done and created to say, that's where this should fall in place. And that's where you might want to plug that in. And then over here on this side, just giving his cousin an opinion in the moment so that his cousin could feel good about the direction that the band was taking, if for nothing else. Mike was not opposed to the musical direction that they were taking. I don't care what anyone tells you. I don't care what their opinion is. Mike Love was not opposed to the musical direction. He questioned the lyrics because he didn't get it. And the reason Mike didn't get it was because he wasn't dropping acid.
No, but also, and I think it's fair to say, if you look at Mike's solo work, that there's nothing that he's done that approximates the kind of music that Smile is. I don't think he has any interest in making that sort of music, it's fair to say. Regardless of, whether he was pro or anti, it's just not his bag. So even if Smile did get finished and get released, I don't think Mike would have gotten it. He may have even appreciated it from afar. But okay, so we're getting way off the topic of the question, which was, how did you get ESQ off the ground? But all of this stuff actually brings up a more dialed in question, which to me is the Beach Boys Corporation, as it were, is a famously tempestuous organization with some really particular personalities. I've just started my thing, and already I'm in a little bit of trouble. How does one, ride that middle line in being able to communicate opinions about a music that has so many very individual points of view going off at once? How does one do that and be able to appease all parties at once?
Well, one of the things that I have found to be true in my experience with the guys over these 30 plus years is just looking at the authentic truth to circumstances. You're obviously in any given circumstance, if you have 5 people in a room, you'll have 5 perspectives. It doesn't matter what the circumstance is, whether it's Mike and Murray and Brian having a conversation where Mike and Brian tell Murray, we're sorry, we're done with you, okay? We don't need you as a manager. Mike telling me he doesn't remember it being anybody but the 3 of them. So you have to just kind of look at the root of the foundation of the moment. And one thing in all of my interviews over the years regarding the Smile music, including Brian has told me he shelved it. He didn't think it was appropriate for the time. And I'm not the only one he has said that to. But yet, there is this huge conglomerate of people out there who still want to hold Mike responsible for Brian's decision. So is Brian's decision, well, because, not all the guys support it. The only thing I'm going to say to that is if you're going to look, we have to look at the truth. And one of the truths that we have that's unmistakable is that Mike sang on everything he was asked to sing on. So if the guy did not support the project, he would not have lent his voice to the recording. Plain and simple. That's not my opinion. That's proof in the pudding. My favorite song is Cabinessence, which is the one Mike was most notably questioning because he just didn't get the whole thing. And what Cabinessence is it's a Norman Rockwell painting in audible format is what it is. It's freedom from want. It's Ma and Pa Kettle.
It's so pictorial and it is so synesthetic that even if you don't have powers of synesthesia, you have no choice in the matter.
Exactly. I mean, that's why it remains my favorite song is that I get to listen to American history being sung to me by the Beach Boys, and their voices, in the meantime, are also the steam coming out of the train engine. I mean, it's just all so perfectly formatted into a recording. Every time I listen to it, I feel like I'm listening to a painting.
My favorite touch, by the way, is it wasn't enough to have all that stuff. They then had to bury a truck driver monologue. You can really barely hear it. It's really more of a subconscious thing that it's even happening.
Yeah. My buddy Lee Dempsey's got an acetate of Cabinessence where that catch as catch can part of the song is up higher. And even then it's difficult to sing along to. You can't really sing along to it. You can get there if you finally get the cadence of it, but the cadence is so unusual, and that's Dennis's bit in the song. But yeah, it's very interesting. It's a great recording, as is all the music on the Smile era. Even the little unfinished bits to me are as good as it gets. For Brian to have done what he did with the technology of the time, the tracks that he was able to work with to get what he got on those recordings and to get as far as he did, and really what kiboshed, taking away the fact that he shelved it. If you go back to the fact that he, by October of '66, when Good Vibrations is released, 75% of the album is almost done.
Yeah.
And Cabinessence is already underway. And you have a point where they say, well, Brian, they're wanting another single from you after Good Vibrations comes out. So he then puts everything on hold creatively and starts working on Heroes and Villains. And he then does with Heroes and Villains what he did with Good Vibrations and takes multiple months to work on all these sections. That's what's so frustrating, right? As we love this music, that's what's frustrating. You hear it and you hear the part 1 and the part 2 Heroes and Villains. Why wasn't that released as a single that way, as opposed to, for lack of a better term, the dumbed down version of Heroes and Villains? It's still an incredible song, but kind of got dumbed down, and they took the G part out of it, and then they put You're Welcome on the back, which is a lovely little song, but I really wish it had been Heroes and Villains Part 1 and Part 2. And then had Brian been able to go back, and then Vegetables was supposed to be the next single. Is there in litigation with Capitol? Had You're Welcome been on the backside of Vegetables? But again, we're talking about what ifs. And so
the what ifs are so incredible to talk about, because one of the most phenomenal aspects of Smile is the quantum physics surrounding it. Because in the alternate worlds theory of quantum mechanics, everything that could happen does happen, just not necessarily in this reality. So in the reality where Smile does come out, it's the butterfly effect. You know, what does the release of Smile change? And in my eyes, it's so much fun to play with those possibilities. And, you know, the reality where January 67, you know, where those orders for the record are fulfilled. What does wind up happening with the Beatles? How does it change popular music, if at all? You know, does it wind up changing everything, as I like to think that it may?
I absolutely believe it would have. But what I encourage people to try to understand, no matter what level of Beach, you know, a fan that they are, is when you're ahead of everybody, when you're the one who is changing the industry, because you're so far out ahead of everyone, you know, I don't blame Brian for thinking it wasn't appropriate. I think it was appropriate, but he didn't think so at the moment. And that's okay, but that doesn't make it Mike's fault. So from me getting into the Smile stuff, one of the record conventions I went to, it was early on in my discovery of the guys, and I'm impatient. There's this guy in front of me going through the Beach Boys section, you know, one record at a time, and I'm very impatiently waiting behind him, and I'm, you know, getting frustrated. I remember being frustrated that he wouldn't get out of the way, and he turned around and we met, and that was Lee Dempsey, and we talked. I don't remember how long we spoke, but I know that in that first conversation and meeting, I talked deeply about the Smile stuff and how much I was into it, and there was like another record convention 2 or 3 weeks later that either we both knew that we were going to be at that one, or whatever the circumstances were, we were there at the next one, and he said, "Hey, come on out to my car. I want to play something for you." And I went out to his car, and he had a cassette of all this Smile stuff that I'd never heard. We must have sat out there for at least 20 minutes, maybe longer. And then he popped the cassette out, put it in the case, and he said, "That's for you." And that was kind of the moment where my friendship with Lee Dempsey began. Where we really, you know, got into it. We became fast friends and have been doing ESQ now all these years. So Lee at the time, I don't know at what point for him, but Phil Edgell and Rick Mast were a couple of guys out in San Diego, and they founded Endless Summer Quarterly, I think, in 1987. And Lee wrote for them. So he was, I guess, a subscriber to the magazine, and he wrote a section called Chuck's Rolling in reference to Chuck Britz. And it was usually some sort of analysis regarding a certain session or something. So he told me about the magazine. So I subscribed, I think, in 1990. And I got 4 issues for the year subscription. And back in those days, we didn't have technology like we do. So you couldn't do a whole lot with fancy graphics or anything like that. But there was 2 things that, one, in the 4 issues, the news section was written by the late Les Chan. And anybody who knows that name out there in Beach Boys land knows how passionate Les was for what he did. He was way into it, and he was great. I loved reading the news section because, again, we didn't have Google back. We couldn't just go online and search for stuff. So Les's section of the news section, that was the thing I looked forward to the most. If Lee had an article, I looked forward to that. But the magazine at that time was mostly just sheet music taking up a page, and sometimes photos of the editors with their arms around the Beach Boys. And that didn't really do anything for me from a learning perspective or making me feel like I was a part of it. So those were the 2 things that I wanted in this magazine, is I wanted to feel a part of it and I wanted to learn something from it. And that didn't happen. So after 1 year, I didn't re-up my subscription. Lee moved from, I think it was the Raleigh area, down to Charlotte because his job brought him here. And so we saw more of one another. I was working in radio at the time as a morning show producer. Phil and Rick contacted him sometime in the summer of '93 and said, "Hey, we're done with this. Beach Boys won't give us the time of day. We have 200 plus subscribers. I don't know what the conversation was, but they contacted him and said, we're done. Do you want to buy the business license? Lee contacted me and said, yeah, I'll do this if you want to do it with me, because I can't do it alone. I said, okay. So that's kind of how that transference happened. We started doing it. My first interview in August of 93 or sometime around that time was with Dean Torrance, Jan and Dean. I was working in two different things. I was doing morning show producing in Charlotte at the oldie station. And I was also working at another oldie station, a little rinky-dink place down about 45 minutes in Monroe, North Carolina. And that's where I did the interview from. But I remember being very nervous, because I was talking to somebody who, again, going back to the Dead Man's Curve film, this is my entrance into this world. And here I was talking to the guy.
Not only that, but, interestingly to me, you're one of the only people that I've met who came to the Beach Boys through Jan and Dean and not the other way around.
Yeah, so I was just enamored with the whole early 60s thing at that time. The early 60s music to me was more interesting to me through the lens of Jan and Dean. The 64, 65 onward became more interesting to me for the Beach Boys. I liked all the early music kind of comparatively the same. The Jan and Dean stuff was equal to the Beach Boys stuff. It was kind of symbiotic and kind of married well together because it was all about the same stuff. It was cars and girls and surfing. And I like that. But when you get to 65, Jan and Dean do folk and roll, and I love that album, but that's kind of a different path for them. And the Beach Boys, from what I understand, reluctantly to Brian, okay, yeah, I'll do a summer record. Okay. So if it'll buy me more time to do what I really want to do, sure, I'll do summer days. Well, whatever you want. Yeah. So that's kind of how it took off. And then November of 93, the Beach Boys, the Good Vibrations box set, the 93 box set came out, and they did their little mini unplugged box set tour. And the first show they did of that tour was in Charlotte, North Carolina. And we went to that show. So it was a moment, and I'll probably get goosebumps here, or maybe even cry. So Matt Jardine stood out during that show. But that's when I got to see Carl Wilson. I think it was Vegetables into Wonderful, or Take a Load Off Your Feet into whatever. Oh, it was into Wonderful. I watched Carl Wilson take off his guitar and walk over and sit behind a keyboard with the spotlight on him and play and sing Wonderful. And I had got to tell you, that was it for me. I just discovered Smile. I'm all into Smile. And here I'm getting to watch Carl Wilson perform a Smile track. And it was everything that for somebody who just started doing a Beach Boys magazine could have possibly wanted, I think. It was for me. And so that, to me, for me to get to see this, for me to have this opportunity for this moment, I felt as though I was, doing the magazine was the right place. It was kismet. It was supposed to happen. It was fate. And so then when Carl passes, February of 98, Lee told me, I was going over to his house, and he told me when I walked in the door, and literally I felt like the wind had been taken out of my sails. And I just remember sitting on the steps in his house and trying to process that information. And that night I went out to dinner, and I just remember sitting there thinking, what do I do now? Carl Wilson just passed away. What does this mean for a Beach Boys magazine? What do you do? Two Wilsons are gone now. What could there, I had a moment, and the moment was, I can't remember what the specific thought was, but the desire was, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to honor the memory of Carl Wilson in such a way that Beach Boys history will be documented well, in that this group will be celebrated. And so if he's looking down on me in my heart, I will know beyond the shadow of a doubt that I have done good on behalf of Carl Wilson. Because in 94, they played a local show here. It was an outdoor ballpark. And that's when I really got to talk to him. He was backstage, and I finally got to kind of meet him. The first time I met him was very brief. But he came around the room. We horseshoed. I was at the end with Lee, and he came around the room, and everybody he went to, he said, "Hi, I'm Carl Wilson." And he shook everybody's hand. "Hi, I'm Carl Wilson." And if he stopped and knew somebody, he would say, "Hi." And then he would talk to them and ask them how they were. But he got around to us. He said, "Hi, I'm Carl Wilson." And I'm thinking, of course you are. And that was just memorable. We talked briefly, but then the following year, he came out, and I didn't get a photo with him the first time. As a fan, you're thinking, oh, I didn't get an autograph, or I didn't get whatever it is you go through. Some people don't need anything. They just are grateful for the moment. But I wanted an autograph, by God, and a photo. So the following year, he comes out, and we're talking. And I said, "Do you mind if I get a photo with you?" And he said, No, that's fine. So we're standing next to each other. He's slightly taller than I am, and he's a wide-shouldered fella. So he's got his arm around me, and I say, "Thanks." He kind of goes, "Sure." But in doing that, he kind of pulls me in like a loved one. Just this reassuring, warm, sure. And the photographer took 2 photos of me. And in the first one, you can kind of see in my eyes, like, holy crap. There's that look in my eyes. And the second one, I got a smile on my face. But it's classic because Bruce photobombed us. Bruce walked between us and looked at the camera. So I have this great photo of Carl, Bruce, and I. But then the last one I'll share about Carl was they were doing their Stars and Stripes album. And everybody was in Nashville because they did lots of promotion. So Brian was there, Carl was there, and I had my Pet Sounds album with me because I wanted to get Carl to sign it. And I got Carl's signature on Pet Sounds, Sunflower, Friends, and the Smile album flat. So I had Pet Sounds with me. They said, "Who do you want to talk to of the group?" And I said, "Carl." And that was like the press people. They were lining up people to talk to the different members about the album. And Brian was there, but I wanted to talk to Carl. Because as I was getting to know the group more, this is 96. As I was getting to know the group more, it became clear to me that Carl was kind of the foundational, settled, some would say glue, but I say emotional soul to that band. And I had picked up on that. And so I just wanted to talk to, if it was going to be one person that I was going to talk to about this project, it was going to be him. Mm-hmm. And I got a little bit of time with him. He went back to the trailer, and then I was kicking myself. I said, "Oh, shit, I had this Pet Sounds album." And so then I got my Sharpie ready. I'm holding the album, and I'm just hoping I see the van, the shuttle they're going to get into. So I'm kind of standing where I was, and he comes out, and I said, "Hey, Carl, would you sign this for me?" And he does. He signs it. He hands it back to me. And as he's walking away, I'm looking down. I look up and I say, "Thank you, Carl." And he's just about to get into the van. He's easily 10 feet in front of me. He stops completely, and he turns on his heel all the way back to me, and he looks me in the eye, and he says, "Thank you, David." But when he passed away, I discovered that's what he did for everyone.
Yeah.
I was not unique. I was a part of that man's gift to give back to the fans and his love for what he did and his genuine love for people and for what he did for a living. He genuinely loved music and he genuinely loved people. So I just wanted to share those experiences because that moment in 96 when he turned on his heel, looked me straight in the eye and said, "Thank you, David," that carried with me. So when I find out that he passed away, that's the feeling that I'm holding in my heart. And that's how I decided, okay, I'm going to make ESQ better than ever. I'm going to really give it my attention now. I'm going to really pour my soul into it.
If people want to subscribe, which they should, where do you want them, if there's a preferred way for them to do this, to subscribe to Endless Summer Quarterly?
Well, the most direct and easiest way, I think, would be just to go to the website. I mean, if whatever your search engine is, just type in Endless Summer Quarterly. The website address is esquarterly.com, esquarterly.com. You can kind of look around there. There's the magazine subscription button. You just click on that. You'll see the testimonial video with the Beach Boys and myself where they're all telling people to subscribe. I mean, if the Beach Boys telling you to subscribe to the magazine and telling you it's unheralded and nobody else does the research that I do, if that's not enough, then I don't know what's going to get you to cave.
There is no greater validation, truly. You're also honest. I would imagine that if there was somebody in your position, and I didn't know who you were, who was able to toe the line and have the backing of all the guys, that they'd be afraid to be honest and to tell the truth as it is, and you're not. And so that's really what I value the most about you, David, in your work. I really do.
Thank you.
A heartfelt Discograffiti thanks goes out to my beautiful son, Mason, David Beard, Rudy Fishman, Becky Boyd, Jay Schultz, Bespoke LA, my mom, my dad, Joe Kennedy for that killer new theme song, my incredibly loyal fans, and especially the entire Patreon community, the Soldiers of Sound. I love every last one of you, and this show would not exist without you, my friends. And so, till next we meet, don't let our youth go to waste, lads and ladies. It's Discograffiti!